Thanks again for having me. It's a great joy and a great pleasure to be here with you. As Father said, my name is Father Adam Streitenberger. I work for the diocese as the Director of Evangelization, which oversees quite a bit throughout our initiatives and strategies and planning and everything. I've been ordained for 15 years. I did my college seminary at the Josephinum and then my theology at Emmitsburg, Maryland, Mount St. Mary's. If you're familiar with St. Elizabeth Ann Seton, that's where she is buried, is in that area. After ordination, I was in Newark and taught at Newark Catholic for 2 years. And then I was in St. Matthew's in Gahanna for 2 years, primarily doing work at Mount Carmel East Hospital. And then I was 6 years in Portsmouth, Ohio, as the pastor down there of 2 parishes. After my term in Portsmouth, I requested to finish a degree that I had started, and Bishop Campbell allowed me indeed to do that. And just as Bishop Campbell was leaving, then Bishop Brennan came, and I was finishing my degree, and voila, here's where I'm at. So I was asked to speak about ecological justice. And to begin with that, I think there is this recent encyclical. Pope Francis put out this document, this letter, in 2015 called Laudato Si. It is a phrase now that you're familiar with. And it really was the first, we might say, official document dedicated to ecological justice that the Church has produced. Various bishops' conferences in different countries have put out statements and even documents on it, but this was the first one that really came from the Pope himself. What I wanted to kind of talk about today, because of course now that you are a Laudato Si campus, you are going to become very familiar with that document. I don't want to steal all of the thunder, so I'm not going to lay out the entire document for you. But maybe, and I think it is fitting and appropriate that as you begin this journey implementing Laudato Si, that I focus on the background, sort of the foundations for Laudato Si and for the Church's understanding of ecological justice. It is, of course, ecology, the focus on ecological justice. It seems to be a very new, modern approach, a modern understanding of the need for this right relationship between the human race and the world, creation, nature. But actually, the roots of the Church's understanding of ecological justice are very deep, and it's really connected to the core of what we believe as Catholics. It's certainly something that is far deeper and far older than Pope Francis's document, Laudato Si. It begins with the Church's understanding of creation, what we believe about creation. You know, very often when we hear about creation, we think of this particular part of our belief that God creates out of nothing, this creation ex nihilo. But there's also another, I think, almost as important point in the Church's understanding of creation. And that is that God has created an imperfect world. Now, the Church doesn't have to really repeat that teaching because I think all of us who live in this world experience that it is imperfect. But that imperfection that the Lord has allowed, has permitted, it points to a dignity in creation. And so we could say that an imperfect world is better than a perfect world. Because in an imperfect world, God is inviting creation to cooperate with him in the process of creation. This is really the inherent dignity that we as humans have, but really every created thing has. That by God's design, He is inviting everything and everyone to cooperate in His work of creation. And so we distinguish two types of causality, two types of involvement in creation. There is what we call primary causality, and then also secondary causality. Primary causality is God's involvement. That He created out of nothing, that He sustains existence, that He guides it through both His direct will and also His permissive will. And that permissive will points to the secondary causality. That God, out of His great love for us, has created us to cooperate with Him in creation. And so secondary causality describes how the various created things cooperate with God in the work of creation. And that happens, secondary causality happens according to our nature. We cooperate with God according to our nature. And so everything that is created, it has its own unique special role and means by which it cooperates with God in creation. So when we look at the types of created things, angelic beings, human beings, living things, animals, plants, viruses, bacteria, and even these sort of non-living created things, things like water or the elements, they all cooperate uniquely in the work of creation with the Lord, again, according to their nature. So human beings who possess reason, who possess freedom, we cooperate with God in the work of creation by exercising our reason and our freedom. That is, of course, I think where the Lord's permissive will is most seen. That the Lord allows us to cooperate in the work of creation even in our mistakes, even in our failings. Living things with their own unique nature cooperate with God. So we might think the lion hunting on the savannah is cooperating with the Lord in creation according to its nature, what lions do on a savannah. Or the tree that sets roots into the ground and into the rock, whose leaves might fall according to the season, is cooperating with the Lord's work of creation. Or water, as it, according to its nature and its properties and its principles, works upon soil, works upon metal. Again, cooperating according to its nature with the work of creation. This is this sort of, I think, very beautiful view of the world and creation which the Catholic faith proposes. That there is built into the world, even into this imperfect world, a harmonious relationship. We call that original justice. That everyone, human beings, everything, the created world, is built to work in cooperation with each other and with God Himself in the ongoing process of creation. But something happens. And when I say that the world is made in imperfection, a lot of people might immediately think of this second important point, and that is the fall, original sin. But even before the fall, the world was imperfect. But with the fall of the first human beings, we might say that this harmony, this original justice is lost. We talk about 4 disharmonies that come about from the fall of the first humans. The first is a disharmony between God and the human race, and vice versa, the human race and God. Originally, the human race was built to be in relationship with God, but because of the fall, now there is a break in that relationship. We might even say an alienation in the relationship. The second is a disharmony among the human race, that human beings now are divided into tribes and into languages, that there is conflict, which we see throughout human history. Originally, the human race was made to be in harmony, to be united. There's also a disharmony within the human person himself, that our reason, which is one of the things most distinctive about human being, while true, we can still come to a knowledge of the world and of truth. Our senses, which are so necessary in using our reason, are now flawed. We perceive things incorrectly. Our will, another kind of very distinctive human faculty, now doesn't really want to listen to reason. It's in a certain conflict with reason. And then the passions, our emotions, which again are an essential part of what it means to be human, these too are unruly. There is disharmony within the human person. But, and I think perhaps the most important disharmony, this 4th disharmony, is at the heart of our topic today. And that is, because of the fall, there is a disharmony between the human race, the human person, and nature, the rest of the world. There is now a conflict because of the fall, an alienation. Rather than living in harmony with the created world, we find ourselves in a state of alienation from the world. This is the source of ecological injustice. And it is a two-way street, which we all know, but we tend to focus on how humans are unjust to nature, but we also experience nature being unjust to us as well. There is the experience of suffering. You know, our bodies begin to get older and age. We experience the nature of water in some degrees as a source of suffering, in drowning, in flooding. Tectonic plates, which are a part of the Lord's creation, we now experience them as a cause of suffering through earthquakes. There is a sense of disharmony between nature and us. And on the point of the human person, there is, of course, the abuse of nature. And the church has traditionally categorized this abuse of nature when we are unjust to creation under the 5th commandment, which is that commandment, thou shalt not kill. So we find ourselves in this state of conflict. This is the result of the fall, that we experience very often in nature a suffering, but nature very often suffers because of the contribution of human persons. Now, all of these disharmonies that are a result of the fall, the Lord wishes to address. And he does so in the fullness of time in the person of Jesus Christ. He sends Jesus Christ. Now, when we propose Jesus Christ, you know, this divine person who who has taken on human flesh. That God has become incarnate. He has, in a sense, taken on the world. Now, in a way, God was always present to the world. He sustains it by his presence. We call that divine immanence. That the Lord is mysteriously present to every single imaginable aspect of creation. That's why it exists. But in a very particular and unique way, God has decided to take on human nature, to take on creation itself. We might even say that primary causality has taken on secondary causality. That God himself, the source and origin of creation, has become a part of creation in order to restore it to its original intent, to bring it back to that right relationship. This is really what our belief in Jesus Christ is all about, that God himself has taken on creation in order to restore harmony and justice to the world. We call this work of Christ, we might call it reconciliation, that he is reconciling these disharmonies. We might even say that, and this is from both St. Paul but also St. Irenaeus, is he is about this work of recapitulation, of uniting this divided universe to himself and ultimately to his Father. This is his great work. And so Christ's coming, it addresses those four disharmonies. So by his coming, by his death and resurrection, human beings can now be in a right relationship with God as sons and daughters of the Father. The Lord has come to reunite the human race, this disharmony among the nations and among the peoples, through the church, where he gathers the human race together into one unity. He's come to bring harmony to our disharmonious human nature through the gift of grace, the gift of his Holy Spirit, which we receive through the sacraments. He is reintegrating, bringing back to harmony the human person. So, how then does the work of Jesus Christ bring back harmony between the human person and the created world, nature? Well, there are some obvious ways, or perhaps more traditional ways. The first are through the sacraments themselves, the seven sacraments, where Christ uses things of this world, things like water, things like oil, things like human love. He uses these as an instrument, taking them on himself to restore us in right relationship with him. The sacraments, the fact that we have these sacraments that use kind of physical, tangible things, are one sign that Christ is already bringing us back into harmony. That these earthly things, these things of creation with their own nature, now are assisting us to share in the divine nature. Another kind of more traditional way that we might point to how Christ has restored us in harmony to creation is by his cross. That now suffering, physical suffering, emotional suffering, spiritual suffering, it now has an infinite meaning because God himself has suffered in the person of Jesus Christ. And so now our sufferings, our experience of suffering in this fallen world, now become a means by which we are united to Christ and begin to share in divine life. Our suffering now has meaning and value. That when we experience an earthquake, when we experience flooding, when we experience the effects of bacteria and viruses, we don't see those things as some evil per se, but actually now as a means by which we can grow closer to the Lord and live in right relationship with Him through that suffering, which now has meaning because of Christ. But I think, and what I kind of leave us with to reflect on today is how else do we find harmony with creation? How else do we find harmony with creation? How do we find peace with creation? Well, one of them, I think, and it is at the heart of this Laudato Si project that you're entering into, and that is we have a duty, we have an obligation, a moral obligation to protect creation. That just as we have the moral obligation to protect other human beings and human life, so too we have this moral obligation to protect creation, to uphold its dignity. Even perhaps when we experience suffering because of that, of those things, of the nature, the dangers of the ocean, the disasters of hurricane. I think perhaps in a pre-Christian world, these things, these forces which were a source of suffering, we would have to put on our enemy list as something to destroy, as something to fight back at, as an arbitrary force seeking our destruction. But now in Jesus Christ, as enemies are reconciled, we recognize nature as a partner in the work of creation, as someone that we owe love and charity to, and protecting its dignity. Even more so, and I think that leads us to another way in which we live in harmony and peace with creation, where we render ecological justice, and that is through our wonder and awe at creation. The beauty of creation, the mystery of creation, and also I think especially at this university, as creation as something to contemplate, to learn about, and to study through the sciences. That as we lean into our relationship with the created world through the sciences, as we come to a deeper understanding of the nature of creation, of the nature of these forces and elements and principles in the world, the greater wonder and awe, and I would even propose love and charity and right relationship with creation we find ourselves in. And so, as we begin this really wonderful work of implementing Laudato Si here at Ohio Dominican, we're reminded of the deep foundations for this document. This is not just some sort of, we might say, woke experiment of Pope Francis. Laudato Si and ecological justice is rooted deeply in the Catholic tradition, and it's really inseparable from our understanding of creation and of redemption in Jesus Christ. Thank you. That's it. Sure.
I agree with you that the Catholic Church should promote the care of the earth, but why haven't we, in the history of the Church, ever really heard this as lay people?
Yeah, I think to some degree we have. It's just, part of it is it's a very modern realization that the world is in epic danger of destruction. So that as we have become more attuned to the ecological disasters and, ozone depletion and climate change. As science has become more aware of that, the church also has become more aware of that. But if we look back throughout the church's experience, there always, in a sense, has been a care for creation in the sense of, a real respect for animals. So the idea of abuse of animals as a moral problem. Figures like St. Francis of Assisi, who really point to a relationship and a very intentional relationship with creation. The idea of wonder and awe in creation as well. And also, I would say a real respect for human work and labor, especially when it comes to a productive and responsible use of agriculture and things like that. So I would say that just like any other thing in the Western world, any other organization in the Western world, it wasn't until a real awareness of climate change that we could name that. But I think in the church's approach and their faithfulness to these sort of deeper teachings, I think we see evidence of it. Oh.
No, go ahead. I kind of had a follow-up question. I was curious.
Sure.
You mentioned St. Francis and his intercessions and such things. Is there a patron saint of ecological justice?
Probably St. Francis of Assisi, yeah. And St. Francis, so first of all, I have to say, and I don't know if Sister knows this, but I'm a secular Franciscan. So the Dominicans allowed a Franciscan on campus. So, but it's St. Francis, yeah. I'm sure Dominic had a really good relationship with Nate. But and a lot of what I say, it's part of Francis's approach, that he really sees creation as it was always intended, as a brother or a sister to us. That we are all created by God to cooperate with him in the work of creation, and there is a sense of relationship with them. But also, Francis was aware of he was centered on the incarnation in Jesus Christ, and that because God has taken on the things of this world in his incarnation, there's an even added dignity. So we talk about the dignity that's there from the moment of creation before the fall. But now that God has taken on these things and has entered into creation, there's now an even higher dignity. And so Francis would rejoice in these things because of creation, but also because of the incarnation. So, yes?
I don't have a question, I have a comment. I found your talk to be both fascinating and inspiring. Yeah. And fascinating in the sense that I never thought about participating in collaborating in creation. It's just as a matter of, my nature, like you were explaining. But it strikes me inspiring in the sense that by going beyond that, being proactive. So working on the disharmonies in an active way. So working on the disharmony between man and nature with Laudato Si, or working on disharmonies between man and man when you do anti-racism work.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's another level of collaborating with creation. Am I right in saying that?
For sure, yeah. We have, so in the sense, Jesus Christ has done all the work, but we still have to help. It's just the same with creation. God created it, but we have to cooperate with him. In the same way, in the redemption of these disharmonies, we have to cooperate in the sort of restoration of these disharmonies. And we do that in different ways, according to the different things. Obviously by living a moral life and in right relationship with other human beings and with nature, we're bringing harmony to ourselves. That's how we kind of build this harmony within ourselves. Obviously in our right relationship with other human beings, And we can look at all of the various forms of injustice and justice as a part of that. One of the interesting kind of caveats of that disharmony between human beings is the church very often points out, and we see this in the creation narrative, is there is a particular disharmony, we might even say a fifth disharmony between men and women. And that kind of conflict of gender inequality is really at the heart of the fall, is sort of a product of the fall. So that's another important area of restoring that harmony. So.
You make me very, very proud. Do you have a question, Deb?
I just wanted to learn this, okay? How do we learn this? You know, everybody just can't come, where you get this information from. So we can teach it to our children, things like that, because I think the younger you learn things, the more effective.
Yeah.
So I'm hearing things for the first time. I'm 70 years old. Okay?
Yeah.
So, and if I had came here, I wouldn't have heard these. So,
Yeah.
God has a way to open doors.
He does. Yeah. Amen.
So, I have a friend here that's here now that invited me. So glad he did. So I'm thankful for that.
We're glad you're here. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, we got to get the message out, and that's always the key. So.
Where and how?
Yeah. They've recorded it. We'll put it out on the internet. So.
But it is true when when John said that, I thought that is true. This has not come to our knowledge sufficiently enough across the world that we all treat creation like it is. I was really so impressed with, first of all, your talk, but I was so impressed the other day when we were just talking, just having a conversation, and this person said to me, "What did you give up for Lent?" So I told her that I wasn't really giving anything up but what I was doing. And she said, "You know what I'm doing?" She said, "I am making a point to appreciate creation. I get up every morning and say, 'God bless the sun,' even if there's no sun." And I just thought that, she said, and it really has helped me to grow in my love of creation. And I think that was a wonderful message you gave us today to show us how to appreciate that we have a long, and it's okay if you're Franciscan. Someday you'll get with it.
Yeah. Well, Saint. You know this story, but so Saint Francis and Saint Dominic met at the Ecumenical Council in Rome, and Dominic so wanted to be a Franciscan. He did. He so did. And Saint Francis said, you really need to do what you're doing. The Lord's put that on your heart. You need to really do that. He said, but you'll always be a member of the order. And Francis gave Dominic his cord to wear, and Dominic wore it under his habit all the time. So deep down closer, he was a Franciscan, but.
I knew that they changed that cord to their belt, but I never heard that was the reason. But when Bob Gervasi was here, because he belonged to the Third Order, I don't know if you ever met him.
Oh, yeah.
But we had a really good banter going about that. So we had statues, one of St. Francis and one of St. Dominic, about the same size. So every time I put them up, I would always stand Dominic on a book. So he